right, I'm showing 3 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for what it's like, an informational session on joining a volunteer fire department. Today's session is brought to you by our partner, Motorola Solutions Foundation. My name is Caroline Stakowiak, and I am a program manager with the National Volunteer Fire Council. I will be moderating today's session. If you are unfamiliar with the MVFC, I'll give you a quick introduction. We are a nonprofit membership association representing the interests of the volunteer fire, EMS, and rescue services. We support and serve first responders by providing critical resources, programs, education, and advocacy. So I'll also tell you a little bit about our Make Me a Firefighter campaign. We have a national recruitment campaign that is aimed at connecting potential volunteers with opportunities to serve with fire and rescue departments. This session was developed to help inform and prepare you for volunteering. If you have not already, please visit makemeafirefighter.org to search for opportunities in your area today. All right, and I am pleased to introduce our panelists for today's session. First, we have Mr. Eric Bernard. Mr. Bernard began his public safety career as a volunteer EMT at the age of 15. After serving with the U.S. Navy and the DEA, he became a firefighter rescuer with the Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service and the Rockville Volunteer Fire Department of Maryland. He is currently serving as the executive director of the Maryland County Volunteer Fire Rescue Association. Our next speaker is Sherry Nickel. Ms. Nickel has been a volunteer firefighter for 21 years, serving in many different roles, including fire chief. She is now the first female administrative director for the Oklahoma State Firefighters Association after being promoted from her role as the recruitment and retention coordinator. Ms. Nickel also serves on the board of the MVFC. And last but not least, we have Chief Mike Ducey. Chief Ducey serves Stevens 1 Fire Rescue, a rural combination fire district in Washington. He has been in the fire service for 35 years, including 15 years as a volunteer. Chief Ducey also serves as a logistics officer for a Type 3 incident management team and is regularly deployed to wildland fire incidents across the state. All right, so before we begin, I'll just go over our agenda for today quickly. We'll first be discussing general training and safety that you might encounter as a firefighter EMT. Then we'll talk about what a day in the life of a firefighter might look like. We'll then discuss the different roles of administrative firefighters or members. We'll then talk about how to juggle the family, friends, and career. What questions are important to ask and what can you expect out of your department's leadership? Lastly, we'll discuss what the benefits of volunteering are. We will have a Q&A session following our presentation. Please know that you can submit your questions to me at any time using the chat box or the Q&A box, and I'll make note of them and save them for the end of the presentation. So with that, I will give it over to you, Mr. Bernard.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's awesome to have so many prospective volunteers join us for this webinar. My role today is to talk a little bit about training and safety, which is to say to talk about everything that involves what you are thinking about doing. Now, we're assuming that you have an interest, but you haven't yet joined. And the goal today is to alleviate any fears that you may have, concerns, and take any questions. So you have 3 panelists that have served as volunteers for many, many years. And for you to be successful as a volunteer is to make sure that you receive every bit of training that's out there and that you do what we do safely. It is every department's job. Every department, doesn't matter if you're getting paid, volunteering, no matter where in the world you are, Every department's job is to do everything they can to make sure that you go home after your shift, after your volunteer call. How do we do that? Our job as leaders is to make sure that in an inherently dangerous job, and make no qualms about it, what you are attempting and thinking about doing is dangerous. Now, one of the first questions I often get when new volunteers come in, and that my own mother said to me over 40 years ago when I was joining in high school, she said, well, when you go to a call, they have the professionals that do the dangerous stuff, right? The volunteers, there's no real risk of getting hurt or injured or, God forbid, being killed. And as I explained to everybody, including my mother, is that we're all professionals. Whether we get paid or not, we're all professionals. And hazards don't know your pay status. Risk does not know that you're a volunteer or that you're being compensated. It doesn't. So our job is to make sure that in this inherently dangerous job, we reduce or eliminate every possible hazard or danger out there. Now, of course, we can reduce or remove all of them. Fires occur. Somebody is called to put out that fire. Medical emergencies occur. And you as a volunteer responder are going to be going to those scenes. But there are certain things that chiefs and departments can do to help reduce those hazards, to decrease the chance of you getting injured. Second, we want to prevent injuries, illnesses, and death. And there are some common sense things that we can do. And you will learn this. And as your volunteer career grows, because as you look at Chief Nickel and you look at Chief Ducey, myself, we all started where you are at today with questions and wanting to join. So you can be promoted all the way up. So you will be in the role one day of preventing these injuries. We need to educate everybody, you, your family, and the government agencies that fund us. Key in doing all of this is having a culture in your volunteer house, a culture that accepts safety and safe practices, that accepts a commitment to doing everything we can safely. And it truly is a culture, because some of the things that you need to do to be safe may take what we call a coolness factor away. Firefighters love to show their grit and their bravado. And one of those ways is by having gear that is smoky, that is dirty, that shows, hey, I went and performed in an emergency scene. And while it looks cool, it's very dangerous. We have learned over the years that the chemicals that happen in building fires that accumulate on our gear can actually be fatal to us. So we need to clean our gear after every fire. We need to monitor what we do and document everything from the scenes that you're on to the type of fires that you're on, because different chemicals burn, creating hazardous byproducts. And so we monitor and document all this into your file. You say, file? Well, I'm a volunteer. Well, again, a volunteer means no pay. It does not mean no responsibilities. It does not mean you don't have a record. It does not mean that you're not going to get the same training that everybody else does that are doing this for a living. As leaders, to make sure you're safe, we are going to provide all the education you need. Your department is going to teach you everything you need to know. They're also going to provide you the tools necessary to do your job. They're going to dedicate the time, the funds, and most importantly, as you see other chiefs here today, the leadership and the commitment to establish this culture of doing an inherently dangerous job safely. We have a national organization known as the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, NFFF. When you guys are done with this webinar, we're done with the questions, Google NFFF and see what they do. It is the saddest part of being a firefighter, EMT, paramedic, because they are there to honor those that have fallen doing this job. and to educate those that are still doing the job. Their rule, their guiding principle is so everyone goes home. Doing an inherently dangerous job, making sure that when you are through, that you go home uninjured, not taking any of the noxious chemicals with you on your uniforms, making sure that you know and your family knows what it takes to be safe. So us as leaders are going to provide everything you need. Finally, we're going to establish and we're going to adopt, we're going to revise, and we're going to teach you and every other volunteer and career firefighter out there what those training standards are, what those safety standards are, why they're important for you. And we're going to constantly monitor them. We learn through research. In the old days, we used to joke, well, what does a firefighter do? Well, we put the wet stuff on the red stuff. And if we get a medical call on a Band-Aid, we put the sticky side down. We joke about it, dumbing it down, but this is a serious profession. This is serious work. This is truly life and death work. We want to assure that it is not your life that is taken doing this job, because through the research over the years, we have learned how to do our job safer, to do it better, and to eliminate more hazards and dangers that are out there. Our number one mission, ladies and gentlemen, fellow volunteers, I'm going to call you a hero because you have decided to take action to become a volunteer. Our number one mission here, our number one goal, our entire being is to do what we do safely, to do it with safety in mind. And we do that by following written standards and practices. So you go after today and you tell your loved ones, you tell your husband or your wife, your girlfriend, your mother, your father, that what I'm doing, I'm going to do safely. I'm going to take it very seriously. I'm going to go to class and I'm going to study. I'm not going to become a firefighter and learn there just to be a bad person, to be all about bravado. I'm going there to learn. And so when I take a test, I'm going to get 100% because I need to know what to do and I need to know and how to do it safely. So we put training and safety first, ladies and gentlemen, because that is our number one goal. That is and should be your number one goal, to do this job safely. Remember, it's inherently dangerous. We can't take all the risk or all the danger away. You cannot tell your mother that somebody else will do the dangerous part. Sometimes the most simple task becomes the most dangerous. Responding to a call, getting out of a fire engine on a highway, on a major interstate. We lose many firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics just arriving on a scene. So training and safety, we will teach it to you. You will learn it. And you will remember back to this webinar where 3 leaders from across America told you the number one goal you have is to do this job safely. I'm not hearing you. Your staff is muted, perhaps, going on to day.
Yes, we're on day to day. So if you all wouldn't mind just giving us a brief overview of what the day to day looks like in your own department.
Sure. Since I'm unmuted, I will start day to day. So I'm in a major metropolitan area right outside of Washington, D.C. in Montgomery County, Maryland. We are a combination system, meaning volunteer and career professionals. All of us professional work side by side in 38 fire stations and rescue squads. We run over 125,000 calls a day. So day to day, most of our stations require our volunteers to come in a minimum of 1 night a week. So I will report to the firehouse at 4:45 on my day. We start our shift at 5 p.m. We check out our equipment. And on my shift are 28 volunteers. So everybody is assigned a different piece of apparatus and a different task on that apparatus. And at the same time, a call could come in. We carry different pieces of equipment. So in my role, I'm assigned a portable radio where I'm always listening. We're checking out our equipment, we're preparing dinner, we're cleaning, and we're responding to calls. So my day as a volunteer is very similar to somebody who's being compensated for the job. I'm expected to be on time. I'm expected to show up in uniform. I'm expected to be prepared to work. So that means I haven't ingested any alcohol within 8 hours prior to my shift. I'm fit and healthy. I don't have any commitments during my shift. And mentally, I am prepared for the job at hand. And I am there until 7 in the morning the next day. Our volunteers here volunteer each month between 72 and 96 hours a month. So that is what a day-to-day looks like for me here in Montgomery County, Maryland. Chief Nickel, you want to tell us about your day?
Well, I'm in a very rural department in the state of Oklahoma. We don't have shifts. We're all volunteers. There's 18 of us, and we run anywhere from 80 to 200 calls a year, depending on the weather and the drought situation and things like that. We have one person is assigned to truck duty once a week. We have to go check all the trucks, make sure that they start, that the tires are good, the pumps run. Basically, we go to work, and if we get a call, we have to drop what we're doing and go to the fire if our work allows us. Or if we're at home, with kids on their birthdays or Christmas or whatever it is going on in your family life, when the tones drop, we get up and we leave and we go to the fire. In Oklahoma, we do have over 900 fire departments. They all range from, different amounts of call volume. We do work hand in hand with paid firefighters in different parts of our state. And we're just the typical volunteers that some departments do have shifts, but mine doesn't. We're on call 24/7, 365.
Okay, I guess I'm next. This is Mike Ducey. I'm fire chief of a combination department in Washington State, just north of Spokane, Washington, which is a major metro area. We have subdivisions that people would recognize outside large cities, and we have extremely rural areas, which about 14,000 acres of those are burning as we speak inside my fire district. So we get a combination of a lot of different calls. When I arrived 11 years ago, we were running 11,000 calls a year, or take that back, 1,000 calls a year. And this year we're going to be pushing 2,000 calls. So we're growing. We have 8 paid firefighters, 4 part-time firefighters, and probably around 60 to 70 volunteer firefighters. We went to a shift system several years ago because of the call volume, and to take away what we call the volunteer guilt, asking who's going to be around that night, afraid to go to dinner with their family in town. And it's alleviated a lot of that guilt. They pull 4 12-hour shifts a month on station. We built 2 new stations that have bunk rooms in them. So that's alleviated that. The other thing that did for us as well is allow people from outside the district to volunteer with us. And that opened up a huge pool of volunteer candidates for us as well. So that's how we do it. The typical day is they'll come in at either 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. A lot of our volunteer shifts are at night, but they'll work right alongside our paid staff day or night, depending upon the schedule. And with our training, it's very hard to tell the difference now. And I'm very proud of getting us to that point. I say I mean, we as a full staff, a lot of input from them once given direction. Their day consists of coming in, making sure their rigs are put together, SCBA checks, all that kind of stuff. And then moving onward to any training that needs to get done. In morning, they'll throw a breakfast together. At night, they'll plan their dinner, whether they eat right after they come in or after training is entirely up to them. So during the day, there's a lot of training, a lot of administrative work done by mostly the career staff, but also the volunteers are assigned different things. They'll do some training during the day. I encourage them to be out of the station as much as possible. I'm not a guy that says park the truck behind the door and lock it up until there's a call. The more they drive them, the better off we are in avoiding accidents and getting used to the rigs. At night, after training's done, meals are eaten, stations are cleaned. It's bedtime. A lot of our volunteers have to get up and go to work the next morning. So shift ends at 6 a.m. So a lot of them will get up at 5, get a shower, get ready for work, and hopefully don't catch that last call. But if it does, they're still usually on their way to work by 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. And that's basically it. We still have respond from home volunteers. We have 8 stations, so there's still 6 stations that need respond from home volunteers, and not everybody wants to pull the shift on station, but it does allow us to pull in volunteers from not only new volunteers from outside the district, but volunteers from smaller departments that may not have the run volume and they don't quite get the experience they want to get. They can get that through our program as well. And I have no problem what they do on the 48 hours or outside the 48 hours they're given to us every month. So it works well for us. When I got here, it wasn't like that. We continue to change and evolve based on volunteers' needs.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Chief Ducey. Appreciate it. So you heard 3 different types of systems, and everybody's day and night is a little different. So maybe it's day to day, it's day to night, night to day. We're getting some questions. Caroline, do you want us to do some questions now? Is that all right? Some are pretty simple.
Let's hold off on questions just so we can stay on our time.
Clear.
So I am taking note of the questions that we have coming in, so you all know. So we'll try to get to all of our questions at the very end.
Cool.
All right, Miss Nickel, I'm going to pass it on to you.
You're muted, Sherry.
In addition to what Chief Bernard talked about, there's a lot of things that go into getting us prepared to be safe. In my state, we're not having people move into our towns to be a volunteer firefighter. So we have to utilize the talents of people that want to be on the fire department. Not everybody can handle being in a fire. Not everybody can handle the medical calls, but there are some people that would be interested in being a firefighter and do some of the light duty things. And also they'd be very beneficial to us to do paperwork. More and more paperwork has transpired over the years. The main thing in particular is we're all accountable to ISO. And there's a lot of paperwork that goes into that. You have to have your hydrant testing, your pump testing, your hose testing, your ladder testing. You have to have static testing for your air packs. You've got to maintain your training records, meeting minutes, and then of course pre-plans. In our state, we get county sales tax money. And with that, we have to have receiver reports and inventory cards for our county commissioners to be able to give us the money legally. I know some states get state tax money. I'm not sure what paperwork's involved with that, but we do get forestry grants. And of course, with that, we have to have all the run reports turned in to NIFRs. If your fire department has to apply for FEMA grants or any kind of other grants, there's a significant amount of paperwork that's required for that. Now, just because you have that person on your fire department that can maintain your records, that doesn't mean they're excluded from the fire ground. For instance, I do that kind of paperwork, but I still run calls. Other people in other departments, they can run command, they can service support personnel, they can roll hose, and they can do all the things that once we're done on a call, we're tired, we don't feel like doing, those people can do that. So as time has gone over the years, I think more accountability has come into play for volunteer fire departments. And I always preach that ISO is the ultimate responsibility to our citizens, because if we have a high ISO rating, they're going to have a higher insurance rate. And if we can get their ISO ratings down, then their property insurance goes down. So that's just another consideration that you can take into account whenever you're recruiting people from your community.
Great. Thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll go into our next sort of group discussion. Eric, if you want to start us off on how you juggle family, friends, and career.
Certainly. This is my favorite topic because where I volunteer now in Montgomery County, Maryland, I'm not from. I grew up in Pittsburgh, came in this area as my last duty station in the Navy. And I stayed here because of FFC, friends, family, and career. I combine all three. My volunteer firehouse are my friends. They are absolutely my family. They're my sisters and brothers. And it's my career. Getting a lot of questions about why don't volunteers get paid? Well, you can take this into a profession, into a career, if you so choose. Interesting fact, ladies and gentlemen, 70% of the firefighters, EMTs, paramedics in America receive no compensation. They're volunteer. Now, they tend to be in the smaller areas. Big cities generally are paid. Why is that? Well, if we had to pay every firefighter, your taxes would be out. They'd be crazy. So the way I juggle it is FFC is the same. Firehouse are my friends and family. And I lived in the firehouse for 3.5 years. So depending on where you want to volunteer, you may have that opportunity. When your life is on the line, when you're going into a fire, you need to have the utmost confidence, faith, and friendship and trust in the people that are going in there with you. Again, doesn't matter if they're paid. I work side by side with people that make a lot of money, and not enough, but they're paid. And I trust them with my life. So I juggle it by combining them. And I think anybody in this will tell you that the volunteer fire service and the career fire service are like the military. It's a family. It's beyond friendship. So I think it's very simple. You're doing something probably because you want to help, you want to be part of your community, but you're probably looking for that bond, that strength, that friendship that is beyond. It's beyond family. It's love.
I'll go next. I'll echo Chief Bernard had to say, and go Pittsburgh. I'll add that in there too. So friends, family, and career. This coming from a divorced individual, probably because my career mostly came first. But anyway, that's part of what goes in. Balance is important when it comes to that. So I want to emphasize balance when you get into something like this. My fire service family here, or organization, is family. I went through a pretty major surgery 6 years ago. I was off for a month. I got fed meals. I got my grass cut from the whole organization. And the friends are the same way. Most of the friends you're going to develop are through the fire service. But I would also encourage you to keep your non-fire service friends as well, as you need time away from fire service chit chat. Especially in today's, politically volatile world, that can weigh on you too much. Don't push those non-fire friends away. You don't always have to be recruiting firefighters from that group. So just think of that. As far as career goes, 15 years as a volunteer. I had 21 years on a fully paid department, and 11 years here as fire chief. I don't like the term career for paid firefighters, because I know a lot of volunteers that have put 40, 50 years into an organization. And to me, that is a career. That is a career. They may be an architect and they may be a volunteer firefighter. In that case, I see them having two different careers throughout their life. But this is a great way as a volunteer to get in, get some experience, get on your resume, and get hired by a full-time department. One of the things that we're changing our model on is if you volunteer for us, we will pull from if we need part-time position filled, we're going to pull from our volunteers. If we need a full-time position filled, we're going to pull from those part-timers. So it gives you a great path. Now, we don't hire a lot over time with that. There's always potential, but at the same time, it prepares those individuals to go on to outside departments. Well, I hate to lose great trained people. At the same time, I can tell you, there's nothing but pride when one of my guys comes in or one of my ladies comes in and says, I got hired by a full-time department. I had a wonderful volunteer. She ended up getting hired full-time by the city of Atlanta Fire Department, which was her dream. And I hated to see her go, but proud as can be, I've got a member on the Atlanta City Fire Department. So that's where we're at. Pay attention to all three of those, but balance would be the key that, from my point of view, that you really need to keep.
All right,
For myself, you know, the quote, birds of a feather flock together, that pertains to me. I'm a volunteer firefighter. My husband's a volunteer firefighter, and both my kids are volunteer firefighters. I don't know that I have but a couple of friends that aren't related to the fire service somehow. So I don't really guess I have the balance that Mr. Bucky has, or Busey, sorry. As far as my career goes, over the last 20 years, I've been real fortunate to have several jobs that have accommodated my hobby as a volunteer firefighter. My husband, he works for the electrical company here in the state of Oklahoma, and we've had to move into several different parts of Oklahoma. And fortunately, we've always been able to slide right into the volunteer fire department in whatever town we've lived in. My jobs, I worked for our state for about a 9-year stint, and we have state legislation that allows volunteers to be able to leave their job to respond to calls. So I was real fortunate with that. And then I worked on full-time as a medic for about 6 or 7 years before I took this job with the state association. So I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to follow my firefighting passion. My family's grown up around it. They understand the need for the volunteers in our communities, and maybe I'm one that probably needs to learn a little bit different balance, but this is our way of life. And honestly, I wouldn't change it for anything.
It is a lifestyle, without a doubt. And I think if Caroline, we got the great picture everybody's seeing. And if you look at that, everybody's wearing 2 sets of clothing. They have their firefighting gear, and then they have their profession. And that is an awesome picture to show that, as Chief Busey said, yeah, dual professions. What we use career, everybody has a different term, but non-compensated. We don't want to be pejorative. If you say professional, that kind of indicates that volunteers aren't, and they are. So I told you more than almost 70% of firefighters are volunteer in America, and EMTs. I will tell you where I'm at here in Montgomery County. The reason I brought up Pittsburgh is I stayed in Montgomery County because of the fire department. When I met my wife, and she's not a volunteer, but I say she's part of the volunteer service for 34 years here in Montgomery County in Rockville, is because I told her I'm staying here. When we bought our houses, our 2 houses, they had to be in my fire district near the firehouse. So that balance, yes, Chief Busey, I would agree. You got to get that balance. We all have other hobbies. I have a motorcycle, Harley. I'm part of a club, and my profession. I teach forensic pathology at George Washington University, and so we all have other things besides being fire and rescue. But it is, yeah, balance can be one of those issues. So I think that tells you little bit about friends, family, and career. Getting lots of questions. We will get to those questions. You want to go to the next area, Caroline?
Yes, we will. So this slide is for Chief Ducey, talking about what questions to ask and what can you expect from your leadership.
So a lot of people get into volunteer firefighting because they want to help their community. They don't look at the long-term ramifications on what that means for them as a volunteer. You always hear about, I just want to give to my community. I want to volunteer and give to my community. So the questions you need to ask and look at, or what do you want out of this? As an individual, what do you want to get out of this? Yeah, you want to help your community, but what else do you want to get out of it? And I'll go back to Chief Bernard's initial slides on, first off, you want to be safe. You want to make sure you're safe. But do you want a career to become a full-time firefighter? Do you just want to work your day job or night job and be a volunteer firefighter for the years to come? So what do you want out of this? Do you want specialized training? Do you want just to be a volunteer? Do you want to focus more on medical? So there's a lot of questions that you need to understand first before you go apply for that application and go through any type of interview process. What else? What can your department do for me? I see a couple questions popping up here and there about types of education, and we'll get into that in the general questions. But what can when you're in an interview or filling out an application, ask, what can your department do for me? Can you compensate me a little bit for my time or equipment used or fuel? Can you train me? Do you provide equipment? I review a lot of grant proposals for FEMA, and there's guys digging into their pockets to pay for fuel and rigs, and God bless them for doing that. But is that what you want out of the organization that you're joining? If that's okay with you, that's fine. But at the same time, you have to understand what the organization can do for you as well. What do you provide that goes into that? We compensate our volunteers for those shifts. It's not a lot due to IRS rules and other issues. And how much, and maybe ask what the average volunteer gets compensated for over a year. What are your prospects of becoming a career firefighter? If the first question is, what do you want out of this? And you say, I want to become a career firefighter, and I mean by paid, then how will this department help you accomplish that task? What are the chances of getting hired on this combination department? What are the chances of that combination department or volunteer department going full-time in the future? What about with other agencies? What's the success rate? Like I said, I'm very proud of being able to place people in other departments. Even two of my career firefighters went on to get hired at positions and ranks above what they left my department as. It was terrible to lose the knowledge, but it's still a pride thing on our behalf. This is an important one, and if they can't answer this, it's probably a big red flag that pops up. What's the average length of volunteer service? Ours right now is 3 to 4 years. I'm trying to get it to 5, because once we get people around the 5-year mark, I can tell you that they stick around. We're having problems with some of our younger folks. They go all in, and then after about 3 years, they go, I want to do something else, and they give up fire completely. It's just a generational thing. We know we're dealing with it. We have a plan in place through a potential SAFER grant that I hope to hear about soon, that will help us train them even better in leadership and organizational cultures to prepare them for a longer career with us. The more time commitment we can get from them up to that 5-year mark, the better off we feel that we're going to retain them for a longer period of time. What's and is that trending upward or downward? The other question on the trend up and down is, are you getting more volunteers now, or are you super short? What was the number a year ago, 2 years ago? What do you project those numbers to be? That'll tell you if there's an organizational culture issue, or the organizational culture is in good shape. I got this question interviewing a potential part-time person They asked me, where do you see this department in 5 to 10 years? I think that's a great question for a potential volunteer to ask. That'll give you career prospects. That'll give you, if the person interviewing you isn't the fire chief, has it been conveyed to that person where the organization is going? That's important too. If they're out of the loop on that, then maybe they're out of the loop on a lot of stuff and the upper echelon doesn't communicate well. If in turn they say, well, you know, in 5 years, this department's going to be here, in 10, we see this, and they're dialed in, that's great. That means everybody's involved in getting information. The last thing is, how does this department's culture affect me? And that one is a little bit harder. You may have to ask other volunteers on the side. You see them, you know, at the grocery store or something like that. You know, ask them what their culture's like. You know, is their culture deeply rooted and hard to change? That can be frustrating for a lot of people. I know even at this age, my age, it's still frustrating to see a organization stuck in a certain culture. I can tell you ours has changed over the 11 years. I don't want to keep it in one spot because you get complacent. So to me, those are the basic questions you need to ask coming into an interview process. And then I think we can open this up to the others.
Thank you, Chief Ducey. Mr. Bernard or Ms. Nickel, do you have any thoughts on additional questions to ask before we go to the next slide? All right. So our last slide before we move into the Q&A session, probably one of the most important. What are the benefits of volunteering? Mr. Bernard, do you want to go first?
Sure. And I will ask everybody to look at their screens. Look at those pictures. What's the first thing that strikes you? I'll tell you the first thing that strikes me. Look how close everybody is. This is family. Benefits are intrinsic or extrinsic. You're going to determine what the benefit is. We'll throw out all kinds of things and not knowing what drives you. Yes, money drives a lot of people because you need money to survive. I would tell you, though, if you see the smiles on all those people's faces, the number one benefit that I see, and in my 40 plus years, starting when I was 15 in high school, is that family, that interconnection with people, not just the people you're volunteering with, but the people you interact with every day doing this job. I wear my uniform with pride, on and off duty. I love to meet people, and what drives me is the ability to affect somebody positively. The ability to know what knowledge I have here, I can shape and change somebody's outcome, maybe short term, but maybe long term, saving a life. There is no greater calling, no matter what religion you have. And look at the diversity. I'll tell you where I'm at here. Our volunteer fire service outside of Washington, D.C. is over 50% female and over 50% minority. So I'll start some of those questions you're already getting. It doesn't matter where you're from. As long as you're in the country legally here, and everybody's going to be different. You don't have to be a citizen yet. But we are 50% minority, 50% female, and we are family. We are smiling. We are close. That is the number one benefit. Now, some of the other chiefs talked about there is some compensation. We also, too, have what we call a nominal fee that we give from county tax dollars each year. Some volunteers do receive some compensation to help them pay for gas, meals. Some of our departments provide all the meals when you're on duty. So for me, it's the intrinsic benefits here of the heart and what I'm doing. I'm not going to say that I don't enjoy some of the extrinsic benefits. So I will tell you that every department's different. In Maryland, we have some tuition benefits. There's some tax benefits. As a volunteer, 3 of the last 5 years, you can deduct some money off of your tax that you pay the state. Federal law changed last year. There's a $600 income benefit that you subtract from your federal taxes. We have tuition benefits, not just to study fire and EMS, but for all college. Chief Nickel, you want to talk about some of the benefits that you all have?
Well, aside from a lot of us using this as our purpose in life, it's for me, it's purpose driven. I feel like I have a purpose. I like to help people. I like to, in people's darkest moments, be the light and hopefully help them have a better outcome. And I know that that's what it is for a lot of volunteers. We have a statewide firefighters pension system. It's just a little benefit at the end of your 20 years of service. You get $7.53 per year that you volunteer at the end. So you get about $150 a month for the rest of your life after you reach the age of 65. So there's that benefit. Some fire departments compensate their firefighters per run. I was on a department where we got $5 per run, and then at Christmas time we'd get a check for our yearly runs. So there's not a whole lot of financial compensation here. Most of it's purpose driven.
Chief Busey?
Yeah, so real quick, I outlined a little bit of the financial benefits. Obviously, the commitment and care of the community, the training you get, the camaraderie that comes with the job, the additional family that comes with the job, and not only within the ranks, but when you go to conferences and stuff, you meet up with a lot of family members, if you will, on the national scale. So, you know, just that alone. But you know, I try to preach to high school students, you know, volunteering on your resume is great. Volunteering with a volunteer fire department is actually, you know, off the charts great on a resume, especially if you can use your fire chief as a reference. Whether you're going for a fire job or not, maybe you're going for another job completely, but they still want to see that volunteering on there. A lot of companies promote that. And a lot of companies will work with volunteer firefighters as opposed to volunteers for doing other things, knowing that you could be late for work or have to leave early. I won't get too deep in, but you know, the one thing I noticed when I got here was in the middle of the night, I went on a call, one of my first middle of the night calls, everybody was in uniform, and that was coming from home. There was a pride in there. There's a pride that goes with that camaraderie and family feeling as well. So we could probably do an hour on benefits of volunteering. These two covered it great. I just wanted to touch on a couple things that we had as well. And if there's more questions to that later, we can answer those.
All right, great. Thank you all so much. So we will now move into our Q&A session. We've gotten quite a few questions, so we'll get through as many as we can, still ending right at 4 p.m. Eastern. But the first question that I want to ask, and we've had this asked in a few different ways, but is there anything that would disqualify someone from volunteering? We had a question about age, about tattoos, about disabilities. Could someone address that question?
I could start. It's going to be regional. I don't want to say there's one disqualification. Everybody and every area is a little different. I'll tell you generally that the big disqualifier, I'll tell you what they're not: age, sex, religion, ability, training. You need no training. You can be binary, male, female. You can be, most places have a minimum age. Here in Maryland is 16, but I have a 79-year-old that drives an ambulance daily. He was a printer. He closed his print shop. He's been volunteering since he was in high school. Religion, we have in our department many chaplains. We have an imam, I have an Orthodox rabbi, and have an Irish Catholic priest just in my volunteer fire department. So those will not prohibit you. Some of the general and tattoos, usually no problem. We call one of our guy finger tats because he has finger tats. They used to read, if you see K Ballard, he had to change those. I'm kidding. It was F, and you can imagine he made them flowers. So you can't have anything obscene. Nicest guy in the world. His paid profession was working at a suicide hotline. So tattoos are not a disqualifier per se. Serious felony convictions may be a disqualification. Some drug use may be. Active drug use in most areas are going to be a prohibition. But anybody else want to pipe in of what you may or may not have as?
I can speak for what we all have in Oklahoma. It's basically up to the authority having jurisdiction. So whatever fire department you're on, it's up to that town or that board to determine if you're hireable. As far as state law goes, the only thing that can prevent you from being a volunteer firefighter is a convicted arson felony charge. When I was fire chief in a fire department, I've had a convict, an ex-con on my department. I've had a guy without a driver's license on my department. You just have to utilize the talents of what you have in your community. But again, for us, it's up to the authority having jurisdiction to determine that.
So for us, there's no real age restrictions as long as you can do the job. I do pride myself or our organization that we're probably about 35% female, which is well above national average. Other than that, the diversity is rather weak, but it's the area we're in that drives that. As far as anything else, you know, felony, almost any felony, well, any felony will exclude you from either volunteering or employment in the state of Washington. And that's kind of our mantra anyway. We're in a huge position of trust that people let us into their homes, and that becomes a huge concern for us, and we don't want to betray that trust. So other than that, you know, we're happy to see anybody. We've got some older folks on, but we have a path for them to drive our water tenders for you on the other side of the Mississippi. That's water tankers. And we've really gotten a lot of folks that really didn't want to put on breathing apparatus or go into a burning building. We've really been able to cultivate that group so that they're driving the water to our scenes and not taking up frontline firefighters to do that. So we have different paths like that. We've narrowed it down, but as far as any restrictions, as long as you can do the job that you signed up for, you know, and pass the interview questions, absolutely.
Sharon, I see the question we get also about education. Again, regional, usually they want at least, they want a high school graduate or GED, but not always again. So you're going to have to check with where you're volunteering at or thinking about.
Thank you. Yes, we've seen that question a few times. Also, a question that's come up is, do you have to be an EMT if you want to be a firefighter? That may be different depending on the jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's a big one too. So in many areas, they're totally separate, and in probably close to equal amount of areas, they're combined. Where I'm at, we're a fire-based EMS system. So if you wanted to do this as a career, you have to do both. Volunteers can choose. All firefighters have to be at a minimum here an EMT, which is over 200 hours of medical training. But not all EMTs as volunteers need to be firefighters. You look at the big cities, they've all juggled with this too. Pittsburgh is one of the largest that has a separate system. Sorry, I just got a call there. Has a separate system. Washington, D.C. has gone back and forth. Baltimore has gone back and forth. New York City has gone back and forth. Do you combine them or separate them? So it's going to be dependent on where you're at.
In Oklahoma, it depends on where it depends on your department also. I've been on departments where most of our calls are EMS calls. The department I'm on right now, they only respond to fires. So it just depends on your department that you're trying to be a member of.
Great, thank you.
I'll tell you, even in fire departments, that if you're not an EMT, we're seeing more and more calls that are medical in nature. So in our fire department, 82% of our calls for career and volunteer are medical in nature.
Yep. That's how it is here too.
Great. Yeah. I do want to mention we've gotten a few questions about where to volunteer. I do encourage you to visit the makemeafirefighter.org website. We do know that not all departments are on that list. You can subscribe to receive notifications when an opportunity is posted in your area. But I would also suggest, a Google search on, I shouldn't say Google, but a search on where you can find, your local department, what department is close by, and reaching out to that department. Any other suggestions if you're looking for opportunities and they're not posted on that makemeafirefighter.org?
Yeah, the people are going to know where they live. So I see some people know that their city may be all career. But yes, look into the neighboring towns, townships, maybe where you work, where you go to school, where you grew up, where you have friends at. That was where Pittsburgh was all paid. So I went to the next borough that crossed the line, and they were all volunteer. So it does require a little homework, but you can do it. You know where you live better than we do. And those departments are going to advertise their opportunities in some way, shape, or form.
And of course, you can also contact your state association. And like, for instance, our state association has the same type of program. You can get on our website and send in a message and ask, what fire departments are available, and we'll refer you.
Perfect.
And again, no experience necessary, right? No
Right.
experience necessary.
Correct.
None.
100%.
None at all.
All right, great. I appreciate that. Just looking through some other questions. Chief Ducey, we've gotten quite a few questions about wildland firefighting. Could you just give us just a 1 or 2 minute rundown on wildland firefighting?
Wow, 1 minute, 2 minute. There's a lot of departments in the West that have wildland only folks, seasonal, as volunteers. We try not to do that just because, the training's different. Then they come in the summertime and we're not, used to them. We don't have that camaraderie and cohesiveness, and which builds the underlying trust issue. All our firefighters are trained firefighter EMTs at a minimum, and they get wildland training every year too. That's a requirement to be a part of our fire district. We cover 370 square miles of a lot of timberland, and it's important to have that. There was a question earlier about leaving a department to be a paid seasonal wildland firefighter. I get it. I don't like it, because a lot of times they'll use our training leading up to wildland season and then leave. And again, we count you as part of the schedule and part of the numbers for what used to be 9 months. Now it's, that number is actually going down. Is our wildland season continues to grow exponentially. We started fighting in April, and we'll probably go through October the way things are going. So we lose numbers that way. We lose a lot of people. Well, I can't say a lot. We've lost several to private contractors. We lose them to the Department of Natural Resources here in Washington State. So we lose that, but what do you do with that? So the potential's there to be a paid wildland firefighter, but we're the first in on these wildland calls. Not the paid folks. Our DNR is not first in. The paid contractors are not first in. Your local fire district is. We're the ones hurting for volunteers, and we could really keep that expertise on staff. As far as wildland training itself, we do our own in-house red card training, which means we're certified to go on fires throughout Washington State. And if you little couple endorsements here and there, and you could go into other states. We sent people as far away as California, South Dakota to fight fires in the past. And then the expertise levels continue to rise up from there through a task book process. But basically it's a couple weekends to get that, and you're set to go. And then a basically a day refresher course every year that we do usually in May before our wildland season hits. So, again, no experience needed. We'll get you through everything.
Great, thank you so much. And we are right at 4:00 p.m. Eastern. I would, hopefully we answered all of your questions that you have. If you have additional questions, you'll see my email address there, caroline@mbfc.org. Please feel free to reach out to us and we'll try to answer your questions. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank our panelists for offering your expertise this afternoon. I do want to mention that when you close your window, you will have a survey open. If you wouldn't mind taking a few moments to answer questions about this session and volunteering, and it is anonymous. Again, if you have specific questions, please email me, caroline@mbfc.org, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Hey, let's close it out with a quote, a famous quote. Anytime you have the opportunity to help someone and you don't, you're wasting your time on earth. And that was said by Roberto Clemente, the great Pittsburgh Pirate.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.